At the making of this video, the LA Clippers are currently 45-22 and are the third seed in the Western Conference. And last season, the Clippers were a team that everyone was talking about as the favorites to make the NBA Finals and to win the championship. But this season, they haven't really been discussed in that light. Most of the discussion has been between who's going to win between the Nets or the Lakers. But with the way the Lakers have been playing as of late, and with the way the Nets have been dealing with injuries, it brings up the question of whether or not there is a team who can win the championship outside of those guys. So in today's video, I'll be discussing why I believe the LA Clippers can win the NBA championship this season. But before we get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want weekly NBA content and to help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. And comment on this video to start a conversation with me as I do respond to all of my comments. And play that intro. First reason I think the LA Clippers can go all the way to the NBA Finals and potentially win the NBA championship is the fact that the Clippers are an extremely good offensive team, as they currently rank second in the whole NBA in offensive rating, which shows how explosive of an offense that they have. This is a team that has a bunch of players who are pretty good on offense, as obviously we know they have Kawhi Leonard, who's a top 5 player in the NBA, and he's one of the best offensive players in the league, as he's a great shot creator. Basically, we all know who good Kawhi is. They also have Paul George, one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. He's also a player who could create his own shot at all 3 levels, and if he steps up in the playoffs, he would make this team that much more dangerous, since he's a guy who can go off for 30 points consistently somewhat. This is a team with 2 of the top 15 offensive players in the league, which is great. And surrounding them, they don't necessarily have any other guys who can create their own shot consistently or go off for 20 points, but they have a bunch of role players who fit their role perfectly. They have a guy like Serge Ibaka who could space the floor at the center position at a good rate, and he's good in the pick and pop. They have Marcus Morris, who's a really good three-point shooter who can go off the dribble sometimes. They have Nicholas Batum, who can handle the ball at times and a player who can space the floor really well. They have Patrick Beverley, who can space the floor very well. Rajon Rondo can make plays for others. They have Luke Kennard, who can hit his three-pointers, although he hasn't been playing much as of late. They have Terrence Mann, one of the more underrated role players in the league. This Clipper team is also really good at three-point shooting, as they have a bunch of guys who are really good shooters and guys who I think can sustain being a good shooter in the postseason. And that honestly makes them someone you don't want to face in the postseason, because they have Kawhi, who shoots 40% from 3, Paul George shoots 42% from 3, Nicholas Batum shoots 42% from 3, Marcus Morris is shooting a crazy 47% from 3, Reggie Jackson is shooting a crazy 43% from 3, Terrence Mann is shooting a good 40% from 3, and Luke Kennard is shooting 46% from 3, and even Patrick Beverley is shooting 42% from 3. That's a lot of 40% three-point shooters. So this is clearly a team that can get on fire from 3, and when you do that, you could potentially beat any team that's in front of you in the postseason. So the Clippers' extraordinary offense definitely makes me think that they can make it all the way to the NBA Finals. The second reason I believe the LA Clippers can go all the way to the NBA Finals is the fact that the Clippers are a really good defensive team, as although they only rank 10th in defensive rating, they rank 5th in opponents' points scored per game. This is just a team that has so much defensive talent, and they can legitimately handle any team at its highest level in a playoff series. As we all know, they have arguably the best defensive duo in the NBA, with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who are 2 lockdown defenders when they try, and they can do a good job on guys like LeBron, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, and other perimeter stars in the league that they might have to face. They also have Patrick Beverley, who's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. He will be very important guarding opposing teams' best guards in the postseason. They have Marcus Morris, who's a solid defender who could give Paul George or Kawhi a break, since those guys are the focal points on offense. Nicholas Batum is a smart defender. He's not going to lock anyone down, but he probably won't get exposed. Terrence Mann is also a solid defender, and Serge Ibaka is a good defensive center at the center spot, as he can switch on to some point guards and be a rim protector. And Ivica Zubac is a pretty good backup defender for the center position. So this is a team with plenty of defenders who can handle any team. If they were to to make it all the way to the NBA Finals and they were to face the Brooklyn Nets, they could do a really good job, as they could put Kawhi on Kevin Durant or James Harden. They could put Paul George on either Kevin Durant or James Harden, and they could put Patrick Beverley on Kyrie. And those guys can all do a solid job, I bet as good as anyone else. So the Clippers defense can really help them go all the way to the NBA Finals this season and maybe even win the championship. Now is the part of the video where I'm basically going to compare the Clippers to other teams in the West and that I think could win the championship. And first of all, I'm going to start off with the Lakers. And with the way the Lakers have been looking right now, it's not impossible to think the Clippers could beat them in a playoff series, because the Clippers have a superstar who, although is slightly worse than LeBron, Kawhi is very much capable of playing just as good as LeBron in a playoff series. And that's something that the Suns, Jazz, and other teams don't have. They don't have someone who's on the level of LeBron. The Clippers have pretty good depth as well, and they have a bunch of defenders who could do a good job on LeBron. And Serge Ibaka isn't going to lock down on Anthony Davis, but I don't think he would do a terrible job. But in the series versus the Lakers, they could beat them, but I honestly wouldn't predict it to happen if the Lakers are healthy, just because of what I've seen from the Clippers last season and from what I've seen the Lakers last season. If we compare them to the Suns, I think that would be a really close and entertaining series. You could go either way on who you think would win the series, but honestly, I would predict the Clippers to win the series, only because they have the best player in the series by a significant margin, and Kawhi is a guy who really steps up in the postseason, and we honestly haven't seen Devin Booker in the playoffs. Not saying he's going to be bad or anything, I'm just saying we don't know how good he will be. And you can legitimately argue in the series versus the Clippers would have the two best players between the two teams. So honestly, I would go for the Clippers, but it is close, and if you say the Suns, I'm not going to call you crazy or anything. If we compare the Clippers to the Jazz, I honestly think the Clippers are better than the Jazz because they have the best player by far. They have enough defenders who could switch and guard the perimeter and at a decent level, well against the Jazz. And on offense, they have a bunch of three-point shooters who will space out the floor and could potentially move Gobert from the basket, and that would make him less effective. If you compare the Nuggets to the Clippers, if I'm being honest, if the Nuggets were healthy, I would honestly put them over the Clippers in that playoff series, and maybe even the Lakers with the way they've been playing. And even though Michael Porter Jr. has really stepped up in Murray's absence, I honestly don't think there's a way the Nuggets could beat the Clippers, because last season they won narrowly, and as I said, I think if they were healthy they would beat the Clippers, but I just don't think they have enough depth to actually beat the Clippers, and that would put a lot of pressure on Michael Porter Jr. to be fantastic, which is not something I would bet on. So basically, I think the Clippers are second most likely to make the finals out of the West, and the only team in front of them is the Lakers, who have been playing really bad with their health. And that just shows that the Clippers do have a real chance to make the postseason, because there is a decent enough chance that the Lakers disappoint and fail because of injuries or something else. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Let me know how far you think the Clippers will go in the playoffs. Drop a like on this video to help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want weekly NBA content and to reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Comment on this video to start a conversation, as I do respond to all of my comments. And I'm out.